Cash, appreciate you giving us some time. Thank you. Chris Sheeran over to the right, you can start.
What went into the decision to DFA DJ?
Tough decisions. In the end, it's ultimately comes down to how this roster sits and what's best. But as you want to provide your manager with enough chess moves to deal with on a day in and day out basis in the game, and obviously, once we got DJ LeMahieu, who's been a great player here, for a long time, and once he came back, we gave him the lane at second. He had communicated all the way back from the wintertime that third base had become now an issue for him physically, and that second and first would be the more likely area. So that's why in the rehab assignment you saw he played all second base, and so that's why when he came up here, we gave the runway to see what it would look like, to see if this dimension with the current setup was going to be workable. And so we moved Jazz over. Jazz was willing to move over to third to like he did last year, and to try to give a lane there to see what we saw on the offense and the defensive side with DJ. And at some point you'd make some tough decisions. You got to look at it. Booney was obviously laser focused on trying to predict as we move forward if this is the best way to go, and he made a decision, in Citi Field that he was going to move Jazz back to second base, and that kind of left us in a situation in conversations with DJ about, well, what's next, and is third a legitimate option or is it not a legitimate option, and if it's not a legitimate option, then where does it leave us, and so those conversations continued. And at any point we could have just kept rolling with it, but I met with DJ last night. I met with DJ again today, and I just ultimately made a decision that best for the roster configuration moving forward. And I'll give you an example. So, like for tonight's game, if Peraza, if Booney wants to pinch it for Peraza later in the game, currently the alternative to play third would be Escara. And that's just not something I could leave comfortably. And so as we walked through it, talked through it, ultimately made a tough decision, and that led us to make the roster change today.
Who else? Michael and Greg.
Brian, you and Aaron have mentioned in different ways, like he's not physically able to play third. What does that mean? Is something wrong with his arm? Why? I mean, he's been a good third baseman before. I know he's older, but what specifically would prohibit him from playing third?
Yeah, I don't have a specific answer. I just can relay, what he would convey. That listen, when we signed him, remember it was a great opportunity for us. We got a player that I publicly said was an everyday utility guy. He can play third, short, second, first. He mostly obviously third, second, and first, and we were going to have him play every day at just various positions, and it was going to be great, and it was. But obviously, since the injury, he shared with me last winter. So when he went on the IL, I can't remember last year what point it was, if it was August or what have you. He got an injection into the hip, and and then did the rehab from that, and he may have since then had another injection. So I assume it's hip related, but but specifically he was always just sharing that the recovery was really difficult. The physical toll on him to tee up at that position was a problem, and so therefore that position is a problem now when it wasn't before. But obviously the last few years we've had a lot of injuries that we've been dealing with, and he's been fighting through, and I know he strongly felt that the best way for him moving forward was to try to solely, stay on the right side of the infield. And even as an example, he played third in spring and popped the calf muscle, and so I know he was linking that a little bit too, as like, as an example of I cannot withstand physically playing this position, that the left side of the infield for some reason. It really did affect his recovery and something he struggled with, and so he was openly sharing that, which complicates the roster fit moving forward. We were still hopeful that maybe we could, get him in a better position physically where we could try that. And he was never not, I wouldn't say he's unwilling to still make the attempt and maybe spell over there. But, it was something that he was without a doubt sharing that he was steering clear of to the extent he could. Because, like anything else, he's got a lot of pride. He's a great player. He wants to contribute to the team. He loves this game, loves this organization. But he felt that was an avenue that was no longer a realistic avenue, and that, kind of ties our hands a little bit more moving forward. And again, you start running through permutations as we try to figure out, best way to line up on a daily basis, whether it's, with the starting lineup or, what bullets, your manager is going to shoot, from the bench in game when things play out a certain way. And so ultimately, after a lot of conversations last night and into the day, and just kind of made a judgment call of, because there's no right time to do any moves, and but just felt like this probably isn't going to be the best circumstance moving forward then. And I definitely didn't want to put ourselves in a position where we're cut short in the game, and with the flexibility that you want your manager to have. So I designated him for assignment today.
Great. To the right, Cash.
Given the toll that injuries have taken on him in recent years, was this a move that you considered doing in the offseason before this?
There was no pressure point. Obviously, we're invested in him. His contract's through next year. Yeah, they always have hope. He fought every step of the way to put himself in a position to reclaim where he was, and obviously be an everyday player, and getting the time off from the end of last year with the injection in the hip, and then the due diligence and the work coming into spring training. I think he felt good that he was in a better place, and obviously we're hopeful. We're hopeful that, all right, let's see what this looks like. And then we lost him. I think it was the very first game. He pulled the calf, and and then obviously had to wait for him to recover and then get the rehab games going. And the rehab games were tough because we kept getting rainouts and stuff like that during that process. But so it's kind of like waiting to see what we're going to see, because it's been the last few years of injuries and not sure, where that was going to leave us. So a lot of I guess the gray area of timing, which is when is enough time that you can make a true judgment here, that this is at least what it is here currently as this current roster is constructed, and this is how it's going to play, and is that in our best interest moving forward, obviously, or not, and so again, just that's what led into the decision I made today.
Over here to the left, Brian. Chris?
Do you feel a need to upgrade over what you have at third base right now?
I'm definitely going to be looking for upgrades if I can. That doesn't guarantee anything. It's the time of year now, so I'll be looking for. We obviously we've lost 3 starters out of our World Series rotation so far this year, so I definitely would look to see if I can find a starter. Despite getting some real quality starts, from others have stepped up, and which has been great, like Will Warren and others, and now we got this, Cam's in today, he's earned the right to be here, which is exciting to see, so I wish him the best of luck and us the best of luck, and looking forward to seeing how that looks, because he's been exciting to watch develop, but certainly love to import a starter, some relievers, because our bullpen obviously has been taxed and some injuries, and so an infielder as well, if possible. But that's a long list, and I'm not sure if there's if this will be a deep deadline or not. So I don't know how active we can be, but we will try to be active. I can tell you that, and we will try to import improvements. That's the gig.
Chris, Gary.
I have a non-DJ question, but a couple years ago, you were pretty adamant that Volpe was going to end up crushing it offensively. Obviously, he's still struggling offensively. Why do you think that is? And secondly, with how he's performed, do you still view him as your shortstop of the future?
Yeah, I remember the viral TikTok of me and Joel Sherman discussing whether our development program produces hitters or not. So, I'm a fan of Volpe. I know it's been streaky. It depends on what month you might ask. So right now I know he's had some struggles. The one thing I do tell you I admire about Anthony Volpe is his strength and fortitude. Obviously, he's a starting shortstop for the New York Yankees. Helped us get to a World Series last year, performed in the World Series last year, and he does not lack confidence. And yes, there's struggles that have happened. That's why you're asking the question, understandably so. And yet, he's like this. It doesn't stick to him. It's turn the page, and he's focused on tonight's game. And I do have belief and optimism that he obviously will impact us in a really positive way on both sides of the ball. He's our shortstop, and as I said, I don't forget where he was and what he was doing in the biggest stage of the game last October, and despite the twists and turns of how this season currently is playing out, there's a lot of season left to be played. So I'm not counting him out. I know he's going to be part of the solution rather than the problem.
Do those peaks and valleys offensively make your job difficult to evaluate what he can be long-term offensively?
I mean, it's all part of the ecosystem. Obviously you can't rely on first and foremost, it's a defensive position first, and then second, we have a really potent offense, that's, one of the top run producers in the game, despite obviously the last 6 weeks, the way some things have played out, but it still ranks at that level. And he certainly can come join the party sooner than later, and I believe he will. I just have a high belief in him. But the peaks and valleys are part of a 6-month season. I mean, we got out of the gate, as, somewhat unbeatable for a period of time, and now we're beatable. Right, and that's part of the twists and turns of a season, and trying to ride those emotions and try to keep perspective, but also recognize too the potholes when they come up, which is what you're trying to speak to. I do not consider him a problem. I understand that there's struggles there, but again, I believe he'll be fine.
Just to follow up on that, public defensive metrics say his defense has also taken a step back this season. Is that your view of and your evaluation of his defense?
Yeah, I think his season hasn't gone the way he I know he's capable of doing a lot of great things on both sides of the ball. I also know he's a grinder. At times banged up and playing through being banged up at like all these guys, and so I know he's one of the better defensive shortstops in the game, but I also know that there's at times that that hasn't played out this year as much, and there's probably a lot of different reasons why. Again, him playing through things to be able to post on a daily basis, and that's the one thing. Another thing I admire about the guy is, he posts every day. So again, I think he'll be fine. I think we'll be fine with him, and I think he's part of our solution, not part of the problem.
And then with DJ communicating his concerns about third base, do you regret not bringing in another third base option prior to the spring?
I mean, we pursue options, but they're within everything that we, our ownership provides so much for us to do, but that doesn't mean that we can do everything, at any time. So it just comes down to the array of choices available to you, whether it's a trade or free agent acquisition, and at some point you may run out of how much money you're spending, and some big log might be too much, to add to the fire. If it's a free agent import or if it's a trade import, it might be, robbing Peter to pay Paul and too costly. So of course, to answer your question, would you love to have an established situation there that you plug and play and you're not worried about it anymore? Of course, but that's not where we're at. And did we look in the winter? Of course we looked in the winter. Are we continuing to look? Yes, we're still continuing to look. Doesn't guarantee we're going to get anything that solve that by this summer. Can't guarantee that. But I do love the defense we got from Peraza last night. That was an exciting play that helped us, So hopefully we get another game like that from them tonight.
You're comfortable with the options that you have now if you're unable to get an upgrade?
The general manager of the New York Yankees, I were taught by George Steinbrenner years ago, never be comfortable. So,
Peter.
Just understanding you don't know if it'll be a deep market yet, just what is maybe your expectation for how the trade market might develop, and at what point do these fringe teams kind of decide whether they're going to buy or sell?
That's a hard thing to answer, hard question to answer. So, listen, every time you go out to these markets in the summer or in the winter, those markets are always different. So, like this winter, when to go back to the Juan Soto decision when he went to the Mets, there was a lot of different options that were available. It was a very deep market of choices, especially in the areas of need that we had. So we were able to do some trades and free agents to fill. So that was a bountiful market. I don't know if this free agent trade, this summer trade market's going to be anything close to that. But it's still early. Teams are sharing information. I've had a lot of engagement about our needs and their needs and expressing interest here and there and stuff like that. But I don't want to. I can't definitely say it's going to be a weak trade market. But I can't ultimately say that we're going to go to town. We're going to do everything we possibly can to improve ourselves and try to match up. And hopefully, at the end of it all, we'll have whatever's here on this current roster is remaining healthy, and we can add to it and be very proud of that and take our shot. But in the meantime, we got to win our game tonight. Continue. We got a 2-game win streak going, and hopefully we can add that to 3 and beyond. And hopefully I can fix what ails us because there's some areas on this team that needs fixing.
Brendan and Clapp. Go ahead, Clapp.
Cash, at any point did DJ try to change your mind or at least ask you to give him more time?
No. We had a very healthy dialogue. DJ and I have always been direct with each other, so we can, there's no, so again, we just had a lot of discussion. I shared with him what I was thinking. He shared with me, everything that he had. There was nothing left unsaid, and he knew I was facing a decision, and he just, I told him, I'm going to give it some more thought, and then I'll let you know what I decide, and ultimately I made the decision. And
so you didn't make up your mind after the first decision.
I've had a lot of conversations with him that go all the way back to the summer, to this winter. So, but I talked to him again, as I said last night, and I had multiple conversations with him today, and as I navigated this thing, and in the end of the day, I made a decision I felt was best for us as we move forward.
How did he handle it?
Like a pro. He's a great player, a great person. He's done great things here. Obviously, the last few years have been, obviously not what he or we, had hoped for. But that's also part of the game. Listen, injuries, can change the dynamic and the equation altogether. And so, all he can do is keep doing the best he possibly can, and then that's his job as a player, and then my job as a general manager is to try to put the best roster out on the field for our manager to manage through on a daily basis. And obviously, I felt in the end of the day, today was the day that this tough decision was was to be made.
Brendan, go ahead. To the right,
Cash.
Sorry.
Jazz said that Jazz has been playing through a little bit of a banged up shoulder. He said that he suffered it on the throw from third base. Did he communicate to you guys at all that he needs to go back to second base?
No, I wouldn't say. Again, I didn't have conversations like that with Jazz. I can tell you that so Aaron Boone had a lot of conversations with Jazz. So dating back to last year and now dating back to this year, I think Boone talked to him last winter. He talked to him last season when he moved him over to third, and he did that. And it happened again this year too. I think his preference is to play second, and now I'm just sharing what my manager tells me in his conversations with Jazz, who's been very respectful and obviously willing to do what's best for the team. And I think his preference is to stay in one spot. His preference is to play second. I think that's his best position, especially for us. He's very athletic, and you want your best athletes up the middle, center field, and shortstop, and second base, and obviously catcher. I learned that from the great scout Bill Livesey. And Brian Sabian, when those guys were combined for us down in the minor leagues. And so Jazz's best spot, and for us, is at second, and that's his preference. But, Booney had some heavy lifting conversations when DJ LeMahieu was coming back from rehab, and Jazz was willing to move over to third. So that's what led to it. But now, obviously, after the evaluations of how this has all played out, he's moved Jazz back to second, and here we are.
Separately, do you feel like you have any prospects that are untouchable, as they would say, going into this trade deadline? Players that you bank on?
Some less touchable than others. How about that? You're going to have to just...
Jorge and DJ.
Or some more touchable than others. Oh, sorry. However it works.
You mentioned during the winter pursuing options at third base and, adding more logs to this and maybe being too expensive ultimately. How about right now? How much flexibility do you have to add an established veteran who's making real money, maybe at third base, a starting pitcher, or will you have to maybe shop at a slightly less expensive sort of department?
We'll see. I'm going to engage everybody on everything, and I'll share all that information with ownership and see where that takes us. I've had deadlines where I've acquired talent that had to be paid down to make it fit, that were making money. I've had deadlines where, I took on big contracts and stuff like that. So ultimately, the great thing about the Steinbrenner family is they're willing to they want to listen to everything that the market is, willing to bear. And Hal's always told me, do not assume, anything, make sure you take everything to me. And explain the thought process by the group and just keep me informed, and I'll make the final call.
Disha.
Meaning he will make the final call.
Just as it became clear the last couple of seasons that DJ wasn't playing at the same level with all those injuries, were you kicking yourself a little that the contract went through his age 37 season with that large financial commitment?
No, because that's just the nature of the beast. Sometimes these things work out in your favor. Sometimes, they don't. Like I know during the negotiations too, in DJ's case, if I remember right, the conversations led us to a longer-term, lower AAV contract. So we could have front-loaded it and had a much larger number for maybe shorter years. So instead of 15 a year for X amount of years, it would have been a much higher number for shorter years. But obviously every year we're dealing with the tax consequences and trying to make it all work with the money available at the time when you're doing these type things. So that's my recollection. So, but no, I don't we and he, had full intentions of, he was a great player when we got him the first time out of free agency, and then we retained him and expected, that to continue. But unfortunately, it's a difficult sport and injuries happen and that can change the equation. But no, I don't look back at that. And, it's wasting my time, I guess. So no.
Take a couple more, Dave.
Cash,
You described your team as more beatable lately. You know, the LeMahieu move was obviously big considering his stature on the team and the financial commitment to him. Do you think you need more big swings this month to make your team a World Series?
No, and maybe you give me
Contender?
a chance to clarify. I'm just acknowledging that, like, we have not played good baseball here now for an extended period of time. And then earlier we played great baseball for an extended period of time. We're always open and interested in taking big swings. We want, always every year is this is, that short window to try to drive this train all the way to the end. And but I know that we have a good group of players here that are capable of winning on a consistent basis, and we have an opportunity to add to it. Obviously, with hopefully running into some opportunities in the trade deadline and getting these other guys back from the DL or the IL, and then hopefully maintaining what we currently have that's active. So we'll see how the next 3 weeks or so play out. But I'm always interested in adding something that'll have big impact, that'll supercharge us. But I think that's true every year for every team, and it just the conversations will take you where they take you, and you're hoping that your matches are the same best matches in the other opponent's eyes. I mean, because I got 29 other teams trying to do, some of which are in contention, some of them aren't, some of them are buyers, some of them are sellers. So obviously, I'm competing with the buyers. I'm trying to improve this roster and finish it off. So hopefully we can do it.
Max, take us home.
You had mentioned the multiple areas of need. I'm just wondering, over these last several weeks, as you've fallen into second place here, is there one concern that stands above the rest for you?
It's always pitching. Pitch is always going to be that. I know we've taken hits in the rotation. Going back, when we lost Cole and then Luis Hill, and then obviously now Schmidt, and so amongst others, Yarborough's was a hell of a player for us and doing some great things. Fernando Cruz. So whether it's bullpen guys or starting pitchers, it's just all of it. And so that's the area that we have people that are capable, but I think it also needs to get some help, and if I can do so, great. But again, there's no guarantees. It's we're going to be fully engaged and see where it takes us, and hopefully we can run into some opportunities that can benefit us.